We live in a world that punishes women simply for existing. Men hate women, women hate women, women hate themselves. And there are so many beliefs and practices and institutions that are based on control and the hatred of women. Religion. Sorry. Oh, there was something caught in my throat. The good news is that a lot of women are waking up to the fact that there's so many things based on misogyny, and we're waking up to the ways that the patriarchy has groomed us. So a woman to that. I don't say amen anymore. That's weird. And with this consciousness comes anger. The girls are mad, and rightfully so. However, a lot of us channel this anger to the wrong places, namely towards men. Not to say there isn't so much to be angry about. Like, if you want to be angry at anyone, it should be men, and you should be clowning them too, because there's so much to clown. But when you internalize this anger, you're giving that hatred life. You're immortalizing it in your body. So the problem isn't the anger, because that's justified, but it's what we're doing with it. And the craziest part of all of this is that we get angry at men who we wouldn't even allow into our life, yet we allow them in our heads. We get angry at men we see online or hear about on the news or hear about through our friends. And a lot of the time it's men who don't even have a place in our lives. Like, come on. So in this episode, we are going to talk about where to put that anger and how to stop letting it marginalize you. Because anger without expression, without a proper outlet, is just self-destruction. And I'll be damned if I let any of you baddies self-destruct. Not on my watch. As women, we have a lot of rage, which is righteous anger, because of the butt crack world we live in. Like, if there are not at least a handful of things about this world that make you literally seethe with anger, then you are probably a straight white man, and I don't know why you are listening to this podcast. Like, please, close it. Close. Go listen to Joe Rogan or something. I don't need you here. You know what? Actually, stay. Maybe you're an ally or you're clowning me. Either way, you're an engaged viewer and whatever. So the thing about anger is that anger with no follow-up is just self-destruction, like I said a moment ago. When you're angry about something and you don't act on it in a constructive way, you are literally a grown adult holding a grudge. Also, hello, greetings and salutations. I'm Nikki, your host, and the baddest bitch in the building. Not to be confused with you, who is also the baddest bitch in the building. And you are listening to one of the most shared and fastest growing podcasts on Spotify. And this is a place where we discuss how to exploit the patriarchy's loopholes, unlearn the ways that the system has groomed us, and ensure that no matter what cards we are dealt, no matter how the deck is shuffled, we're always going to end up with the queen. So if you remember my episode, Girly Law of Power number, is it 18 or 19? Put your demons on your payroll? No, I'm even saying it wrong. Treat your demons as your employees. If you remember that law, or if you read that chapter in my book, which is one that, oh my God, one of my favorite chapters, then you'll know that I talk about anger as your general counsel. Okay, I gave her a job description and a role title and a whole set of responsibilities, because anger points to the things that matter to you most. You wouldn't be angry about that thing if it wasn't deeply important to you. And anger is a really good guide that points us towards things that mean justice to us. And you're doing yourself a disservice if you're disconnected from your anger and you simply repress it, because there's so much you can learn from anger as an emotion. However, unresolved anger turns into hatred, resentment, psychosomatic symptoms. It turns into ulcers and tumors and diarrhea and all sorts of things that we don't want, because you're paying for that injustice with your body. You're immortalizing it in your body and making sure that it lives on through you. And that's not healthy. And let me tell you something. The first time I got hate comments from men on my posts, it was in October or November 2024. And it was on a reel on Instagram that said, men created God because they couldn't accept that woman created life. And oh my God, men went feral in my comment section. And that was the first time I really, I was subjected to so much hate and misogyny from men. And it was jarring. That's the word that comes to mind. It was literally jarring, opening up my comment section and reading the filth that men were saying. Like, I think some guy gave me a rape threat. Like, bro, who are you? Like, who the fuck are you? But these guys, like, the misogyny I saw in that comment section was something I had never in my life seen before. It was stuff I'd hear about, but I'd never experienced it. And that was the moment that really opened my eyes and showed me firsthand how much certain men hate women. And I didn't take it personally because I'm like, these are freaking losers. Like, nobody wants to fuck you. Like, even the rotisserie chicken that you got from the grocery store to stick your in is like rotting from the inside because of your bacteria. Like, I don't care what you say to me, but it was just scary to see that, to see how much hatred and anger is out there in the world. And instead of me turning inwards and getting angry at these losers and then internalizing that anger and becoming a loser because of it, I flipped it the other way and I used these comments and I used these losers as part of my marketing and my promotion for my podcast and my book and all the great things I have to share. Because if this many men are upset about it, then I must be onto something. And I'm not going to lie, I was pretty pissed when I saw these comments because I'm like, how on earth are there people who have this much hatred? And not only that, but who have this hatred and have no problem vocalizing it publicly, oftentimes with their freaking public accounts. Like, are you cooked? See, I'm getting worked up even now. But anger feeds on fixation, and fixation becomes tunnel vision, and it leads to victimhood. Victimella is born from fixation on bad things that have happened. She's born from things that you can righteously be angry about, but she internalizes those things and becomes anger. And victimella is basically an incel in a different font. She's not fueled by hatred or misogyny, although she might be fueled by internalized misogyny and self-hatred, but she's exhibiting the same patterns of unresolved anger. Obviously, what differentiates us and even victimella from these incel losers is that what we're angry about is actually rightful. We actually have something to be angry about. We're not just angry that somebody won't sleep with us or that our rotisserie chicken withered away. We're actually angry about systematic oppression. So, But the thing about anger is that it's a secondary emotion, which means it's an emotion that results from another emotion. And it emerges from our beliefs and judgments about certain emotions. So what you might be feeling is initially sadness. That might be the primary emotion that you feel, but it's oftentimes not socially acceptable to feel and express sadness, for example, at work. So that sadness gets replaced with anger. And that points to another thing about secondary emotions, which is that they're protective. If you feel sadness at something and you cover it up with anger, that could be because you can't afford to express your sadness. You might be labeled hysterical or overly emotional. You don't want to give people access to that vulnerability that you have. And so that anger becomes a tool to protect you. So what often ends up happening is that we repress that primary emotion and instead we let that secondary emotion lead us. And what's interesting is that misogyny operates in the same way. The primary emotion, let's call it, is oftentimes not misogyny. It's ignorance or fear or something else. And then it manifests itself as that secondary emotion, which is misogyny. Because if you look at a lot of these misogynistic losers, that's what they are. They're losers. They're pathetic people who use misogyny as a way to create scapegoats for a deeper thing. I mentioned a few times I used to work with a woman who gave me a really, really, really hard time. And she was the textbook definition of a female misogynist. Like, I've never met a person, I'm not kidding, man or woman, I've never met a person who hated women as much as this woman did. And it was disgusting. Beneath that misogyny, I saw someone who was deeply hurt. I saw someone who hated herself. Like, the misogyny first started with the first woman she hated was herself, obviously. I just saw someone who was shattered. I don't know if a woman abused her. I don't know if, like, I really don't know what happened in her life. And frankly, I don't care. But I could see a broken, hurting person beneath that misogyny. And like I've said before, I do not feel empathy for people who go out of their way to hurt others and put others down. This woman went out of her way to make my life a living hell when I worked with her. So I don't feel any empathy for her. I could not care less how broken she is. But if I were to feel anything, it would be pity. I'm not saying to go empathize with misogynists. I could not care less if they jumped off a cliff. But that I'm just painting this picture for you to understand where this can come from. Now, going back to anger as a secondary emotion, a lot of the time that secondary emotion actually distracts us from what we truly feel. And when we act on our anger, especially in an impulsive way, we're engaging in a form of short-term gratification and short-term thinking. Because we're not thinking about what our bigger goal is or where we want this emotion to take us in a few weeks or years or what have you. We're just thinking about, how can I act on this anger right now and give this person a piece of my mind? And like I've discussed in Girly Law of Power number 33, trigger people's need to prove themselves to you, and Girly Law of Power number 34, never argue, make them look stupid instead. Giving somebody a piece of your mind is almost never a good idea. Think about it. Some of the worst things you've done or said have probably happened when you were really, really angry. There are literally people sitting in a jail cell because they could not control their anger. Even if the anger was righteous, doesn't matter. So it is so important for us to use our anger constructively, because anger is such a powerful emotion, secondary or not. It is such a powerful emotion, and it points us to the things that actually truly matter to us. It points us to the injustices that make us unsettled to the point that we feel restless, that we feel like we need to do something about it. But unproductive anger will marginalize you. And this reminds me of an episode of The Office. If you know from my previous episodes, I'm rewatching The Office for like the 900th time. And there was an episode, I can't remember in which season it was because I watched it a couple of weeks ago. But Jim was getting Andy really, really worked up over something. He was just trying to get him really mad. And I can't stand Jim a lot of the time. I think he's one of the antagonists of the show now that I watched it again. But he was trying to get Andy really worked up about something. And he said in his confessional, he's like, the angrier he gets, the more marginalized he becomes. Because Andy would literally make more of a fool of himself the angrier he got, to the point where he punched a hole through the wall. So unresolved anger will marginalize you. Hey baddies, it's Editing Nikki. So, in case you wanted to join the Patreon, I'm actually going to use a formula from Patriarchy Hack number 5 in my own book, Appeal to People's Self-Interest when Asking for Something. So, in that chapter, I have a formula: self-interest plus strategic flattery plus sense of control. So, for self-interest, I have bonus episodes, deleted episodes that never made it onto the main feed, baddie requested episodes. There's access to my phone line for baddies who want to call me, and if you want me to rip you a new asshole for like sleeping with your ex or something. There's voting power on which girly law of power drops next, access to my close friend story on Instagram. There's lots of perks, all right? Strategic flattery. This is for the baddies who have a little bit of extra cash on the side, or for the baddies who like supporting independent creators like yours truly. And sense of control. Obviously, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. It would be nice, but the world is your oyster, so do whatever you want. Either way, I'm just happy that you're here, and now it's time to get back to the episode. I want you to ask yourself this and be brutally honest with yourself. First, think of something that makes you angry. And I'm not talking about your upstairs neighbor who wears bricks as shoes and stomps around all night. I'm talking about an injustice or a form of oppression or something meaningful that actually makes you angry. And ask yourself, how much of this anger is rooted in my need for control, or in my tendency for projection, or in my ignorance of human nature? Let me tell you something. Most people are weak, self-serving slaves to emotions and projection. And the more you understand human nature and the basics of how people operate, the more at peace you'll become with other people's behavior. Anyone who wants to control other people can barely control themselves. But we are all so clouded in our emotions and in getting worked up and upset about things, and upset about the way someone treated us or something that someone said to us. We get so emotional about these things that we're unable to take a step back and realize that pretty much everyone is a slave to their own projection. And nothing anyone does is personal. Everything somebody does to you or says to you, if they treat you badly, exclude you, even if they freaking punch you in the face, I hope that never happens, but whatever they do, it never had anything to do with you to begin with. That's why one of my first girly laws of power, number 4, is never take anything personally. So this is not to excuse the horrible, disgusting things that happen in this world. This is not to excuse the way people might treat you poorly or treat you unjustly. But I'm not going to get mad at a bee for stinging me. Am I going to be annoyed? Yes. Am I going to be upset? Yes. But I'm not going to get mad at the wasp for doing what a wasp does. It wasn't my fault that I got stung. Actually, one time I was swatting a wasp away and it stung my finger. And apparently you're not supposed to do that. But, it's not my fault, right? If somebody treats you badly, it's not your fault unless you like insulted their mom or something. But you need to understand that people freaking suck. The world sucks. People show their true colors when they end up in power. People show their true colors when they end up being under stress. And again, this is not to excuse it, but it's to give you understanding so you can be more at peace. And a lot of the things that we get angry over are things that we wish we could control, or we wish we could change someone. And that again goes to this tendency we have to project. And obviously there's a lot of conditioning that plays into this because we've been socialized to be people pleasers and to think that we are the glue that holds everyone together, that we have to put ourselves last and take care of everybody around us. So there's a lot of unconscious conditioning that goes into it. But what this podcast has hopefully given you is a level of consciousness that makes you aware of the grooming and the conditioning that has happened over your lifetime. And those things are not permanent. You can actively unlearn those, as I'm sure pretty much anybody listening is doing. But you need to stop trying to change people and control things that are completely outside of your realm of control. You can't free someone who locked their own shackles. You can't expect someone who's had privilege all their life to easily surrender that power. You can't expect someone who has the emotional intelligence of a pumpkin to empathize with you. Yes, they ought to empathize with you. That person, that man who's had power all his life ought to surrender some of it and actually share with other people who are more deserving. Yes, they ought to. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. However, that's not how the world works. If men could just easily relinquish the power that they undeservingly got, then they would have relinquished it and we wouldn't be here to begin with. This podcast wouldn't even exist. But remember that power is never given. It is never, ever, ever given. If it is, then there's probably a catch that you need to be aware of. Power is not given. It is either taken or it's created. And that's another thing you need to understand about the world. So when you're mad at some dude who literally has had privilege all his life, who doesn't even know a quarter of, not even a quarter, 1/16 of what you are going through, oh, he ought to know this. He ought to empathize. And just because they ought to doesn't mean they will. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with like-minded people, with people who are unlearning their internalized patriarchy, and people who you can actually vibe with, because your environment is so important. Now, there is a very powerful antidote to anger. I'm going to let you guess what it is before I tell you. Don't skip the music. Actually, take some time to guess. The antidote to anger is gratitude. I know you might be thinking like, what? Yes. I know that might sound counterintuitive and you might think, well, the antidote to anger should be love or something else. No, it could be, but gratitude is such a powerful antidote to anger because no matter what's happening in this butt crack world, listen, y'all, the aliens are watching us. They're not making contact because they're watching us as their reality show. They don't want to make contact because they want to keep everything as is because it's so entertaining for them. But when you find things to be grateful for, despite the mess that this world is in, that's when you can actually change your frequency to a better, higher frequency. And I use an analogy of a radio. So when you're angry and you're spiraling and you're ending up in a victim mindset and you and Victimella are friends or you are Victimella, you're tuned to the loser station, okay? When you change your frequency and tune yourself to the baddie station or to whatever station you want to call it, and you realize that, oh, okay, I live in this version of this parallel universe that has patriarchy. Hopefully it's the only parallel universe out there that has patriarchy. But I live in a patriarchy, which means that as a woman, I inherently have so much power just by existing that a bunch of losers had to go and make a system to control that power. So just by me having a hoo-ha, I've literally made a bunch of people mad. That's obviously a very general example, but there's so many things that you can think of on the spot. So many things that happen today that you can be grateful for. Something I'm super, super grateful for is the opportunity that I got to write my book because my great-grandma was illiterate, okay? Girl couldn't even go to school. And I'm so grateful for all the women who came before me, the women who fought, who lost their lives, their innocence, their youth to fight for the things that we now take for granted. Because we are all standing on their shoulders. I'm grateful for the opportunity to just be standing here, spitting my facts in this mic. You know what I mean? Even though this podcast exists because we live in a patriarchal shithole, I'm still grateful for the opportunity to be able to do this, to be able to connect with all of you baddies. Even when I'm angry that I'm stuck in traffic. I live in Toronto and it literally takes an hour to get from Toronto to Toronto. Every traffic engineer in Toronto needs to sit on the electric chair. But even when I'm stuck in traffic and I'm big mad, I think to myself, okay, hold on. I am sitting in this car that I own, that I paid for. So that's one thing to be grateful about. I'm driving to go see my friend. I'm driving to go to my office in the bougie part of town. I'm driving to go, to the gym. And I'm grateful for that. So if you're able to find gratitude amidst the anger, that's how you know you've won. Now, like I said, we need to channel our anger to something productive. And I have a whole episode about that. It's called don't quote me on this, 7 things to do with your feminine rage, if I'm not mistaken. I'll link it down in the show notes. And in that episode, I actually break down pragmatic, practical things that you can do with your anger. So this was more so to get you tuned to the right frequency so you can be receptive to now channeling that anger productively. Because if you're not going to follow up on that anger and do something with it, if you're not going to take that feminine rage and create art, start a podcast, write a book, make an Instagram page sharing poetry, whatever it is, if you're not going to make it productive, then let it go. Do not let it fester in your body. Do not let it lead to a tumor or an ulcer or diarrhea or anything that is a psychosomatic symptom of that anger, because the last thing you want to do is immortalize it in your body. Okay, there's enough anger to go around for everyone. We got anger at home, okay? And I'm going to close with this. I'm rereading Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And in one of the chapters, he says that we are all stardust come to life. Because, like I always say, this was so validating rereading this. Like I always say, we are not just existing in the universe, we are of the universe. Everything in this universe originated from the same origin point. So we are literally stardust. And when you are consumed by anger and debilitated by it and marginalized because of it, you can't shine. You can't shine like the star that you are. All right, I am so grateful for every single one of you for tuning in. Thank you all so much for listening every week. Thank you all so much for your support. If you've commented, liked, rated this podcast, engaged with it, or engaged with me in any way, I'm so grateful for every single one of you. I don't even know how to express it in words. Just don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any building that you step foot in. In the meantime, stay bad. Love you. Bye. All right, beef jerky time. That means it's time to run through all my shout outs. Get with the gibberish. All right, shout out to all the baddies supporting on Patreon. Shout out to Kate, Danny, Lindsay, Emberly, Brittany, Hannah, Nadine, Shara, Amanda, Adriana, Mina, Gemma, Katia, May, Naomi, Nilufar, Adelaide, Nadia, Faith, Melinda, Sophia M, Sophia K, Jada, Amara, and Kat. Thank you all so much for your support.
Because if a woman is angry, nothing is moving in this world. Patriarchy ceases to exist. Capitalism ceases to exist. All cogs are out of this machine if women are angry.